Deepwokens Operation Deep Healing finally dropped a few days ago, and with it we got what is probably the single largest Deepwoken update of all time, at least as far as these big-ass patch notes go, because there is a lot here to go through. Anyway, make sure to subscribe, since literally 0% of the people watching this video right now are, and let's get straight into it. Anyway, first of all, and the most important, I'm sure we all know, I've been getting a lot of comments about it that I've been reading, they made a weapon for specifically me. I still don't have it, but they added a frost rapier known as the Cold Point, and it drops from the new Kiersguard Champion, which is the new boss they added in Layer 2 as an optional boss fight. You can fight as like a bonus while running Layer 2 and Floor 2 in New Kyrsa, which I'll talk about later, but I am entirely convinced that this weapon was made specifically for me, because I am probably the only person in the world using Frost Rapier post-detonation Rapier nerf, and I've been advocating for Rapier reworks for a long time, and I am literally known as the Frost Rapier guy now. I get so many annoying people asking for my Frost Rapier build. I'm just gonna ignore you if you ask me for the Frost Rapier build, because it's old, outdated, and it's not even good. I have like 400 health, okay? So stop asking me for the build. It's annoying. Like, it actually is annoying hearing it every day. So I am convinced that this weapon was made for me, and nobody can convince me otherwise. If Archmage himself told me it wasn't made for me, I would call him a fat, dumb, fatty, fat, dumb, lying, fat ass. Because this weapon was absolutely made for me, and, you know, I will be sparing him of those words because it was made for me. Anyway, along with rapiers, they got some changes, right? So anyway, the first new talent they added now is Defensive Stance, which was originally an innate talent of the Apprentice Rapier, which was replaced with the Apprentice Rapier's Careful Stance, which I'm not going to go over that because it's an Apprentice Rapier and it doesn't matter. But since the Apprentice Rapier doesn't matter, that's just irrelevant, right? Anyway, the Rapier's Defensive Stance talent makes it so the lower your health is, the higher your parry frames are. Although it is nerfed now since it is a talent, it's still pretty good. They also buffed two other talents. First of all, Pressure Skewer now makes consecutive hits deal more damage, increasing by 3 true damage until you take damage. I'm not sure if there's a cap on this because the talent doesn't specify, but it sounds pretty good. And Duelist Lunge got a few buffs. First of all, where it now deals chip damage, and the running attack range after a successful critical was increased from 2 to 3.5 studs of range, which is actually a pretty decent buff for Rapier's talents as a whole. However, they really don't play any differently. One of the main things about Operation Deep Healing was that the devs said that they wanted the game's weapons to all feel functionally different from each other and have different use cases. And the explanation and the example they gave specifically was stuff like Great Hammer and Great Axe, which differentiating those would be hard, and I'll talk about this later, but honestly, I think that they just didn't really do too well of a job at this. Like, this is a weird thing to compare because Rapier doesn't feel any difference to use from itself before the update, it just feels a tiny bit better, but they're really just trying to differentiate the weapons from each other and not what they were like before the update. So honestly, I don't have much of a problem with this, but it seems like they didn't really commit to that fully. Because reading through the patch notes, I don't really see major changes that would necessarily change the various weapons' playstyles and use cases in comparison to each other, other than the new talents that they added. But the problem is, adding new talents doesn't necessarily change a weapon's playstyle, it more so just differently buffs weapons differently, if that makes sense, right? Which, like, yeah, buffing certain aspects of weapons can incentivize different playstyles, but it doesn't really change how most people are going to be using these weapons. So honestly, in this department, I think they need to work on some of that stuff a bit more. Like, you know, finally differentiating blunt versus slash damage, because they have been the same thing essentially for the last like 2 years. Now, other than that, we got some progression enhancements, which are just done to speed up progression and streamline it better. Like, good progression changes overall. It gives you stat trainings for doing certain quests, which I think is a good change, and, you know, blah blah blah, bosses give more changes and stat buffs. It's whatever. It really is whatever. Like, I think they did a fine job with the progression changes, but I really don't care that much about it because I'm not ever going to progress a new build. Then the whole reducing the PvE/PvP gap updates, which were meant to allow for more crossover for PvP/PvE builds, which I thought would allow PvE builds to defend themselves from ganks better and then allow PvP builds to be more viable in PvE scenarios and boss fights. Except this update focused 99% of its effort on PvP builds being more viable in PvE by adding new PvE effects to a fuck ton of new talents. I get 2 F words per video and it's still PG-13. Don't be bitching in my comments. And for those of you watching this video in the living room with your parents, chill out, parents, don't turn it off. Your kids are hearing worse at school every day, and at least I teach your kids how to file taxes and do expense reports, okay? So let my videos play. Anyway, they also added a new Bloodrend specific PvE mechanic, which was a good choice since Bloodrend was basically unusable in PvE combat. Either way, I think they should have made certain PvE focused stuff more viable in PvP, because depths gankers have been feasting on depths farmers for years now, and this really doesn't help stop that. As far as actually making weapons differently, apparently bows got completely reworked. I didn't care about bows before, but hopefully they're usable and maybe even viable now. And we'll maybe even be getting some new ones, seeing as how the devs kind of forgot about bows for a while. Like a year or something dumb like that. And also dual gun buffs, don't care. Which, I know I just said something like how the devs forgot about it. We still haven't seen anything from motifs, which, I mean, motifs were added like, what, a year ago at this point? A little bit over a year ago maybe? And they kind of just forgot about motifs after they added them. They added a few for like the next 2 weeks after adding them, and then we didn't get any motifs at all, which I think is just kind of sad, right? And along with the motifs, stance changing didn't get any changes, which is lame because I wanted stance changing to get some changes. A lot of people wanted the rapier stance changing to switch between like slashing and piercing for like penetration versus raw damage, but the devs didn't really do anything with that either. I mean, they did change rapiers, but not enough to make them play differently, I don't think. Now for the most major changes overall, in my opinion, that aren't the content, are going to be the base combat reworks. First of all, they massively increased the tempo gain for using an M1 or light swings, which were parried or blocked by the opponent to stop the dilemma of playing aggressive and still not having tempo for mantra usage. So honestly, this is a really good change, right? Along with that, you can no longer sprint or slide immediately after getting parried. This is more so to prevent certain 50-50s from people uppercutting or running around after getting parried. And this specifically has the most interaction changes with heavy users who basically have a free mix-up because uppercuts are always way faster than your weapon. So out of a parry, heavy users could kind of force a 50-50 by either uppercutting or M1ing, and then you have to be able to react to them, which, I mean, it's technically not a 50-50, but it's still just like a weird mix-up that they get for free just because their weapons are slower than their uppercuts. Along with that, M1 feint end lag was cut in half, so after feinting an M1, you should be able to punish people more often, making M1 feints better and more viable on non-heavy weapons, which would just spam through as much hyper armor as possible for free positive trades anyway. Then, the parry cooldown was reduced as a way to kind of make shaky block more bearable by allowing you to parry sooner. Seeing as how most people hate it, you know, I guess nerfing shaky block in a way is good, which I want to talk a little bit about shaky block in a bit, but I'll tell you guys after this section. Then running attack end lag was reduced to make it less punishing to miss them, and then auto parry frames got lowered from 0.55 to 0.3, which is a 45% reduction in auto parry frames, which honestly sounds insane, so I'll see how that feels when I'm getting new PvP clips for this video. Actually, I probably won't be getting new PvP clips for this video because I think I'll be recording this on Thursday for Friday, but you know, it definitely affects PvE more than PvP since most auto parried multi-hit moves come from mobs and stuff like that for like the Trial of 1 orb attacks. Then the air counter is no longer an uppercut. Now you need to jump and press M2, which is cool, and now the target is based on your mouse aiming rather than your attack direction like it was with the uppercut. And it now has much more vertical range, which is good because when it used to be the uppercut, I have on multiple occasions uppercut into an aerial just for them to fly past me and have it not hit. You're also unable to be air counter more than once every 5 seconds, and the air counter auto equips weapons. Thank you, finally after 2 years. I have on multiple occasions uppercut people and then not have my weapon out, so I aid an exhaustion strike. Great. Now overall, I think most of these changes are just kind of fine. I think the biggest one was definitely the tempo changes, incentivizing people to play with more aggressive M1s, which is good. Incentivizing M1 combat is always good because it makes mages less viable in comparison. Not that it makes mages less viable, it just makes them less viable in comparison, because mages are no longer 600% better, only 500% better. Now with that being said, that thing I said about shaky block I want to talk about because some fucking, that's my second one, so we're still PG-13, idiot decided just like to argue with me the other day and call me like, he was trying to call me wrong about shaky block, but the entire point was he was just dumb, right? So the argument he was making was, oh, shaky block is the reason why fights don't go to like super overtime all the time. And it's like, yeah, but there's better ways to deal with that than shaky block, because shaky block kind of just incentivizes mage gameplay, because shaky block, you hit someone and then now it's an immediate 50-50, which this guy didn't even know what a 50-50 is. But the 50-50 after a hit is the fact that you have to parry them. So they go for a mantra, they either feint it or they don't feint it, and you have to predict which they're gonna do because you can't react to mantra feints. You just can't, especially after missing a parry. You're gonna get put in shaky block and then you're gonna eat another mantra and it forces you into potentially another 50-50. Now, this person didn't know what a 50-50 was and used the example, oh, but if someone M1s at me, I either parry it or I don't, and that's a 50-50. No, you idiot. I don't want to curse anymore, but you are the dumbest idiot I've ever talked to. If you're watching this video, which you might be, because the guy said that he watches my videos, you're dumb, you're stupid, and I hate you. Anyway, I'm joking. No, but that's not what a 50-50 is. The 50-50 is the fact that when someone does that, you can't really react to it. And he said, well then, just don't react to the feint, because most good players fainted anyway. That's the entire 50-50. It's whether or not you react to the initial feint. You either do, and then you get hit, or you don't. And then they can change it, which is also part of the 50-50, where they could just not feint. If you're saying every good player feints, then you're not fighting very good players if they do the same thing every time and are unable to adapt. Now, are you? But yeah, that's generally the reason why most people don't like Shaky Block, because mantra feints are just still too strong, even after this, because they didn't affect mantra feints at all. They just buffed M1 feints, which I think mantra feints need some little nerf. And then you could also just like Grey Cast, where you swing and then feint into a mantra, which can also be used as a 50-50 out of Shaky Block, which it's stupid, because now you're dealing with two separate 50-50s, and you kind of just have to guess what they're going to do half the time, which actively goes against the initial design that Deepwoken was made with, but it's whatever. Anyway, we have a ton of balancing changes that I won't be going through. Arc Warder nerfs, you know, that's cool. I'm tired of seeing Arc Warder anyway. And finally, we have the new content, the Kiersguard Champion. As of now, I haven't fought it yet, but I always lock in for new PvE content, so I'll probably wipe one of my other 300-year-old builds I don't use anymore fighting this thing. Anyway, new secret bosses are always cool additions, so obviously this is cool. It's kind of like when they added Maestro to the game and they didn't announce it. So overall, I'm happy, right? Cool update. Now, with all that being said, was it a good update? Yeah, I think so, overall at least, but I do think a lot of things weren't entirely addressed the way the devs promised, and by a lot of things I mainly think it's really just the playstyle differences with weapons which weren't addressed too well. They added new talents, but honestly I was expecting new mechanics and differences in stuff like damage types or potential use cases for weapons to change to differentiate them better, and honestly this is lacking quite a bit in that department. Other than that though, it is pretty good, and the update coming out is a stepping stone for Layer 3 this year, so potentially great things to come. I will say though, I think that they really did lack on the weapon differentiation, and the biggest example was literally the example that they used. They said, oh, we want to make Great Hammer and Great Axe feel different. Yeah, well, why don't you guys start by making blunt damage and slash damage actually different, because there's no difference in gameplay. Anyway, I just dropped a song cover, new one later this month as well, so go check it out. I drop new ones every month, and this month I'm doing 2 to make up for missing last month's, and it's only, you know, $5 a month since I let any tier channel members listen to them, so you could just, $5 a month, you guys listen to me sing, and you know, that's paying for my song covers, because they take me actual hours to make. Anyway, I let any tier listen to them, but if you want to give me more money, then cool, whatever. But yeah, I'm not live now, but check out my live channel, new videos every Saturday, including tomorrow, which is Saturday, and I go live 2 to 3 times a week, Mondays, Wednesdays, and some Fridays. Hope you all enjoyed, and shoutouts to tier 2 or higher members, Green, Goobka, Philip, Delusional Mo, Elstern, Broccoli, Carlia the Witch, Akio Sugikuni, Burger, IXKMB, High Card, and Jersey Drake Fan. I love you all, have an amazing day, and goodbye.